We're going to have 3 presentations, and I'm going to, rather than introduce each one in turn, I'm going to introduce the first and say who the next 2 will be, and then they will come up serially. So what this is going to be is 3 10-minute presentations about first responder apps and the early experience in Australia and New Zealand. Those who will be speaking to us will be Tony Ahern, Chief Executive Officer from St John Ambulance, West Australia. He can confirm what I've said about Corrigan, I hope. Tony Walker, Chief Executive Officer of Ambulance Victoria. And if people were wondering about whether my name was unusual or short for anything, it's not short for anything. It has 2 N's in my case. That's because the first N is silent. But Lynn is a male name for many of us. And so our third speaker is another one of us small band of people, Lynn Gardner, who's a GP in Yankalilla. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Tony Ahern to come to the podium and address us about first responder apps.
Thanks, Lynn, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in Western Australia as far as first responder apps go. In order to do that, I'll obviously talk to you about the features of the app and just where we're at with it. But I also need to kind of paint a bit broader picture because the app for us is something that's very much a part of a whole strategic approach to what we're doing with ambulance community training and certainly where we see the future of ambulance going. So the cardiac arrest component or the turning out community first responder component is critical, but it is one part of a broader strategy. The app itself, it is out there and being used, and one of the things that you've heard a couple of the speakers that have spoken during the course of the day that have referred to WA, we talk a lot about our integrated model. Our integrated model being this absolute integration between community training and the provision of an ambulance service. In our case, the absolute integration between a metropolitan service and a country service, which again are in our setting are vastly different, and also the integration between career staff and the community, otherwise known as volunteers. And so we have a much broader view of what a volunteer is than perhaps what a traditional view of volunteering in ambulance might have been. One of the other things that's really critical for us, and I'm sort of only going to do a little teaser on this because I'm actually doing this at our state conference in a fortnight. We're going to talk about at our state conference what we think is the new paradigm for ambulance, where in fact response times are a thing of the past, a new paradigm, and in many, many ways largely driven by this and some of the things that you'll see in the app. But that's just a little teaser with that. The app for us, if you like, is a piece in the jigsaw that starts to bring together our integrated model in a way that we couldn't truly achieve without the technology that goes with a smartphone. Just check, sort of your knowledge on smartphones. Does everybody know how long smartphones have been around? It's 10 years. So it was 2007 that Steve Jobs made the announcement about the then iPhone, which was pretty much the first of the smartphones. Another question, does anybody know how many people in the world have access to a toilet? Len, you may know from your World Vision, but yeah, it's about 4.5 billion, I'm told. 4.5 billion people in the world have access to a toilet. 5.5 billion people have access to a mobile phone. That's reality. That's absolutely a fact. So the changes are going to be profound. First thing, community preparedness. One of the things to understand about our organisation is that this notion of community preparedness we take incredibly seriously. We have a phrase that we use all the time at St John in Western Australia, and that is to make first aid a part of everybody's life. And one of the things we say about it is absolutely not a marketing slogan. It's a way of thinking about what we're doing in the community, to make first aid a part of everybody's life. Now, are we serious about it? Well, we are. Back, you can see in 2007-8, we were teaching a little over 100,000, 120,000 people first aid. Our 2020 vision has us teaching the lofty number of 400,000 by 2020. In actual fact, our financial year result for the financial year just completed is that we taught 386,000 people, which is a massive 14.2% of the population. So we take that really seriously, that notion of make first aid a part of everybody's life. The other thing that we take really seriously, and I mentioned it a minute ago, is volunteerism. But volunteerism and volunteer, it's a great word and it's really an important word, but in a way it constricts the thinking within our space. We like to talk about it as connection to the community. So in the community, in small country towns where we couldn't possibly place a career ambulance service, we need the community. We need to be connected to the community so they can help us. And likewise, whether you're talking about community first responder, automatic defibrillators, community first responder apps or whatever, the degree to which we connect to the community is what really makes the difference with us. And so again, you can see the organisation over the last little while in terms of its volunteer numbers or connection to the community really has stepped up, if you like. We have, again, another little saying in the organisation. Sometimes people historically, as the ambulance profession has evolved over the last few decades, sometimes people have talked about as you get more staff, you can replace your volunteers. Our thinking is as we get more career staff, we need more volunteers. And again, they're actual numbers, so you can see it's more than just words. So let's come now to the app itself, which is what you're really here to hear about. This is, as I say, the piece which really allows us to connect to community in a way that we think we couldn't before. So an overview of the app. It was released to the public on the 29th of May, went through a couple of iterations. It was a small trial group of 10, 15, 20 people for a little period of time. Then we opened it up to staff and volunteers, and then on the 29th of May we opened it up. It's been installed by over 4,000 users at the moment, with 2,300 or a little more than that who've actually registered to use it. You can read yourself some of the features there. I guess the starting point for us in just getting this robust, one of the things that we thought was a really good and I think technically not too challenging thing to build into it was the fact that if instead of just dialing 000, you just push the 000 icon on the app, that would automatically send your GPS coordinates into our CAD system. So yeah, private addresses are pretty right with CLI generally, but if you're on a beach and it could be anywhere a kilometre apart, to actually have the GPS coordinates is clearly an important thing. Also, first aid guides, as you would expect, we have those sorts of things there. Defibrillator locator, and first aid tips and discounts. And obviously we'll use the app to continue to be pushing the message about why people should be keeping their first aid skills up. The version that's being released this month, so again we keep upgrading it as we're going. There's a new dashboard, which is the dashboard that you can see up there. It'll also now allow for uploading locations for defibrillators. So one of the things we do in WA, our community first responder system, i.e. putting AEDs into the community, we actually do that as part of a system which says when we put it out there, we geocode it within our ambulance dispatch system so that if we get a call into that location, we know to automatically activate a first responder group. But obviously there are defibrillators out there we don't know about. And so this app will encourage people to take a photo, send it in, and we'll be able to record that. There are some other things that you can see there. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but for those that don't know, St John in WA acquired a health group 12 months ago, Apollo Health. We now have a number of urgent care centres, and we're very much as an ambulance service trying to integrate what we do into primary health in a significant way. And obviously some of the features of this app are to try and help with that. So it will tell you where the medical centres are, it will tell you obviously where EDs are, it will tell you what the current state of the ED is, so real-time information actually telling you what the wait period or wait time is liable to be, and a whole lot of other sort of mechanisms, if you like, that provide really good information. And again, as you would expect, we'll be reminding people about their first aid qualifications. For us, we've kind of taken an approach that sits somewhere between Pulse Point and Good Sam, which is that it's not available to everyone in the community, although it is. It's not just for health professionals, it's available to everyone in the community who's done some first aid. And again, that sits with our objective to make sure everyone in the community has done first aid. Subsequent releases, one of the ways in which we want to see the new paradigm for ambulance, if you like, is that we would like to see that as soon as you push and contact us via the 000, that you've actually got a paramedic with you in the room. So your camera on your phone to actually bring one of our clinical support paramedics into the room, which will be beneficial from our volunteer ambulance service, from community members who've done first aid, but the confidence of having a paramedic seeing what they're seeing. So a whole lot of things with the technology. We hope that release will be I think the development will be later this year. Hopefully the release of that functionality will be next year. So in conclusion, with our app and our approach, it is part of a whole system approach. We think one of the best ways to really get it being utilised is to create functionality in this space where people are using it a lot. So if you think about it, cardiac arrest, as a member of the public, you might come across and be involved in a cardiac arrest case once or twice or 3 times in your life. If we can have you that the way you're interacting with us and interacting through this app as something that goes on a lot more, when those instances arise, it's something that you're a little bit more familiar with. So, as I say, our approach is very much this whole system approach to the concept of first responder app. Thank you.
And hello again to those of you who are here this morning. I'm going to talk a bit about the Victorian experience and the early experience in the rollout of Good Sam, which will be coming to a mobile phone near you in the coming months. Just probably good to set some context around this issue of early defibrillation. This is probably not new to most of you in the room, but certainly there's a lot of good evidence out there to show that early access to defibrillation and early CPR is fundamental to a really strong coordinated system of care, and that use of an AED prior to EMS arrival significantly increases the likelihood of survival to discharge. So that's what the evidence-based literature tells us. If we look in the Victorian context, we've been running a PAD program since 2002, and it has its limitations. We have 97 AEDs across 25 sites, but the real challenge for us is that it's connected to our CAD system as a location of interest. So if you're at the address where the AED is identified, the call takers will advise you of how to use it. If you're next door, we don't have the current capacity to have visibility of that AED. It's a limitation of our system, I know not the limitation of others. We're seeing a significant proliferation of AEDs across the community in Victoria that we are set up in 2005 an AED registry to try and capture those in a way that we can actually connect them up to our CAD system. We currently have around 3,500 AEDs in that system, but the limitations are the ones I mentioned before. So we have a look at some of the work we published back in 2014. It just helps identify the fact that we had 153 people that were over that 11-year period that were defibrillated by a bystander with an AED. 25 of those were at the sites we maintain, 26 were at public events manned by a first aider, and 102 had nothing to do with us at all. They were AEDs in the community that someone knew was there or found and used completely separate to anything that Ambulance Victoria had done other than lift the profile of AEDs in the community. So if you're going to suffer cardiac arrest in Melbourne, you suffer it at Melbourne Airport, the safest place to suffer a cardiac arrest. I know I'm amongst friends, and I can say that it's a perfect storm of AEDs every 200 metres and a whole lot of doctors on their way to medical conferences to use their CME points. When you combine those things together, you get really good outcomes, and so it's been a really positive thing in that regard. The other places, Jeff Wasserthiel's early work around the MCG and Etihad Stadium still safest place to suffer cardiac arrest. And in fact, if as we've seen the last couple of years, we've had the same person suffer cardiac arrest 2 years in a row at the grand final, both times resuscitated. You think you would have got it right the first time, but they decided to come back. So, and the casino, again, not a place that gets talked about a lot, but which does have a fairly good public access response defibrillation program there. But importantly, 113 of those, 74% were defibrillator locations, again, with nothing much to do with us. What we do know from our data, from our registry, is that we're reducing the amount of defibrillating we're doing. And the reason is because people in the community are defibrillating for us before we get there. So we've seen a reduction in the number of patients that we're defibrillating first because others are getting there first. And that's been driven by a fourfold increase in the use of AEDs over that period. So now 11% compared to 2.8% almost a decade ago. So if a bystander shocks someone, you have an 11 times more likely, so bystanders providing CPR, the patient's 11 times more likely to have a shockable rhythm. I think this is all probably not new to you guys, a bit of data in there from Victoria, but it just reinforces the issue that early defibrillation, early CPR makes a difference. So this is also from our registry data. So you can see where a bystander witnessed arrest, 4% of patients were first shocked by a bystander. The proportion of patients presenting in shock or rhythm is higher amongst those with witnessed arrest, bystander witnessed arrest. And you can see there that where a bystander witnessed the arrest, you had a higher likelihood of discharge from hospital. So this slide is probably the most important one from my perspective. So on the right-hand side, your right-hand side, you'll see our normal ambulance response. In the middle, you'll see our response where our first responders respond, and on the right-hand side, you'll see the response where a public access defibrillator is used. So the whole principle for us is saying the best outcomes we get are where someone uses a public access defibrillator, an AED, 76% to hospital, 55% discharge. How do we systemise that so it is actually our normal response? That is that we're actually applying those same principles to every cardiac arrest that exists within the community. So a number of challenges for us that we had to think through this process about how we make the next steps. One is where our location of cardiac arrest occurs. So we considered the various products out there in trying to look at smartphone apps, and one of our challenges was that a lot of them only work in public locations. I have some issues, and we'll work this through the rollout of having strangers walk into people's homes that aren't registered. So some of the products don't register you. And the reality is 76% of cardiac arrests are occurring at home. So whatever we do has to enable people to go into homes if we're really wanting to make a difference. Only 20% of the AEDs that are out there actually I have any visibility of. So there's 80% of them out there that I have no visibility of. There are a lack of agreed standards around public access defibrillations, both Australia-wide and in Victoria, in the sense of cabinets, colours, standards, etc. We're still a federation of colonies in that regard. There are competing AED locator apps, so I can go to download various apps that will tell me where AEDs are, but no single source of truth. And I have to argue from our perspective, our view is that ambulance hasn't kept up in the changing environment. I have to pay credit to Tony and the WA team because St John just quietly gets on and does stuff, and I've got to pay credit to the fact that they've rolled out an app and have it active and is making a difference in their community already, which is again a real credit to them and the work they've done. So let's get on to it from our perspective. Tony's hit this on the head. The introduction of technology is disrupting the way we do business. And I think, as Tony was alluding to, you'll see other iterations of this come through into the future. We know we have SMS and smartphone apps that are out there. There is good evidence showing in Europe around the fact that you can in Denmark you can dispatch people to a cardiac arrest effectively, and they make a difference. And these products essentially connect you to your nearest AED and push notify you of your nearby cardiac arrest. So we're not starting the world on fire here. This is operating effectively in London. It's operating a number of ambulance services in the other ambulance services in the UK and in parts of the US and in Canada. It is a key platform of the Global Resuscitation Alliance, one of the key steps to improve survival. And the true integration is not having these products operate independently but operate as part of your coordinated emergency medical response system. If it is not linked to your CAD system, it is a good product, but you're wasting your time if you seriously want to make a difference to cardiac arrest outcomes. So Ambulance Victoria is rolling out Good Sam in 2018. We've gone to a public tender. We have selected Good Sam as a product. The model in Victoria will basically be initially to trusted responders, and that will be all health professionals. So if you're ARPA registered, you can register and be part of our response. If you are part of a coordinated response system, so if you're a paramedic, we'll all be registered next year, paramedic, if you're a firefighter, lifesaver, a member of St John, a member of another organisation where you're verified, then you can, and CPR trained, you can be added into the system. And that's the approach we're initially taking. We'll be watching with interest because I know where New Zealand and other places have agreed to open it up more broadly to anyone in the community that wishes to be able to respond. We're taking it a step at a time in our regard. We believe this will be the game changer, Victoria. We have good cardiac arrest survival rates, but this will be the game changer for us in actually being able to get the sort of results we get from those 4% at the moment who are currently defibrillated by an AED in the community of 76% survival to hospital and 55% discharge. We will see this. We're wanting to see that being the new standard. If you look at our papers we've published, it is around those people are getting defibrillated in 5 minutes. There is no other way, even with the best firefighter first responder program in Melbourne and in regional Victoria, there's no way I can get a defibrillator to someone within 5 minutes as part of my response. But every single one of you can do it. So I just had a look at Good Sam before. There are 5 people in this room who are Good Sam registered because you're showing up on my app, and there is an AED in this location. So there are 5 people today, if I dropped on the stage here, who I feel reasonably confident would probably, hope there's a few more of you, but are reasonably confident that would be able to come up and they can look at and see where their nearest AED is, which is on Good Sam about 100 metres away. So it's a game changer in the way in which you can be connected to a cardiac arrest event within your area. I'm just going to show you a brief video now, if I can, that is just down the bottom of that there. Is it possible to do, Frank? Are you able to click on that for us? Thank you. Just gives you a bit of an overview. So I think it's fair to say the next 12 months I think will be really interesting in this space. You've got the work St John have done with already rolling out their application. You're going to see a number of ambulance services coming online. We'll be online and live this time next, or certainly by the end of this year, early next year. And you're going to see a fundamental change in the way in which ambulance services are responding to cardiac arrest through the use of disruptive technology. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today, and I'll now hand back to Lynn, I think, who's going to introduce David, or hand over to David, I think, is doing this next bit. So thank you very much.